You've heard stories about that road, how cars vanish and how people disappear. We went there, and what we found at Paranormal M still haunts us. Subscribe to see why. The Scary Night at the Old Farmhouse. Okay, so this is gonna sound weird, but it happened a few winters back when I was crashing at my uncle's old farmhouse. The place is like drafty and creaky and smells like hay, even though the barn's been empty for years. I always leave the door cracked when I sleep, because the hinges squeal, and it's easier that way. So I wake up one night, but not really all the way awake, like my body felt pinned down. Couldn't even move a finger. And that's when I see it, a tall shadow, ducking through the doorway like it had to stoop to get in. Couldn't see a face, just this black shape with something. I don't know. Glowing faint lines wrapped around it. Almost like when Christmas lights tangle up. Walked across my room like it knew where the bathroom was. Like it had been there before, Then it comes back, holding this weird tool thing. Not big, maybe a foot long, kind of triangular. It held it like a scanner or a stud finder or something. Waved it slow over my chest. I wanted to yell, but my voice was stuck in my head. So I kept asking it what it wanted and why it was here with no answer. My dog, an old mutt named Charlie, didn't even twitch. He usually barks at squirrels sneezing outside, but he just slept through it. It was almost worse than the figure itself, like maybe this wasn't the first time. The cords around it pulsed brighter for a second, like goldish yellow. Then it turned and bent under the doorframe again and left. Soon as it was gone, I jolted up and everything looked totally normal. No noise, no light, nothing. I keep thinking about it though, how casual it felt, like routine. Not menacing, not comforting either. Just like it was clocking in for a shift, and that thought gets me, like, how many times has it done that and I just didn't see it? Also, a side note, once before that, something tugged on my ankle while I was half asleep there. Thought it was a dream until I felt it grip my hand like we were arm wrestling. Stronger than me, solid 5 fingers. I stopped fighting it and tapped my chest real quick like, gotcha. Not mean, just unsettling. So yeah, that's my farmhouse story. Could have been my brain or sleep paralysis or whatever, but man, it felt too real. The night my brother saw me. I don't usually post stuff, but I can't stop thinking about it. Last winter, my brother swore up and down that I came into his room around 3 in the morning. He told me later at breakfast, all casual like, "Why were you standing by my closet last night?" I just froze because I wasn't in there. And at that time, I was sitting in the kitchen wide awake scrolling on my phone because I couldn't sleep. I even remember the sound of the fridge kicking on. He said it didn't talk, it just stood there kind of leaning like I do when I'm half asleep. He thought maybe I needed something, but I just walked back out after a minute. Thing is, the floorboards are strange, so when you move around upstairs, I never heard a thing. He's only 9, so part of me wanted to say he was dreaming. But he was so sure, like describing the hoodie I wore the day before, down to the stain on my sleeve. That part really freaked me out because I'd hung that hoodie on the back of my chair in my room. Wasn't the first time either. When we were younger used to say that he saw me come into his room at night. Back then I'd laugh and say he was imagining stuff. Now I don't know. I mean, I don't believe in ghosts, well, not really, but I also can't explain how he saw me where I wasn't. Maybe sleepwalking or doppelganger or just a really detailed dream. I keep trying to laugh it off, but sometimes when I walk past his room late at night, I catch myself checking the closet corner, like maybe I'll see me. The night my living room slipped away. Okay, so I don't usually post stuff like this, but this one's been eating at me. A few months ago, I'm sitting on my ratty old couch in my trailer, just kind of zoning out after work. It was quiet. It was honestly too quiet. The highway outside is usually full of noise, and I was just fiddling. I remember holding my breath for a second without really meaning to. Then I noticed this hum, like a low electric buzzing, but not from the fridge or anything mechanical, more like it was inside my head. The weird part is, the more I focused on it, the louder it got. I thought maybe it was tinnitus just kicking in, but then the room started to look hazy, like somebody smeared white chalk dust into the air, little trails like smoke. It was lifting up near the corners of the room, and I blinked a bunch, thinking maybe it's just my eyes being tired, but it stayed. Then my whole living room kind of shifted. It didn't happen fast like in a movie. It was slow, like watching colors bleed into each other on wet paper. The TV stand wasn't there anymore. Suddenly I was looking at stacks of lumber like old boards leaned up against a wall. The carpet under my feet was gone too. It felt like old cement. But when I looked down, it still sort of looked like carpet, just thin and fading. I kept telling myself I was dozing off, that I was dreaming sitting up. But I was awake, and I swear I was. My eyes were open, and I was rubbing my hands and my knees just to feel something real. The buzzing sound would swell every time I held my breath, then die back when I exhaled. It was like I was half in one place and half in another. Eventually it snapped back. No big flash or anything, just 1 second I was staring at this other room, and next second I was back with the busted couch and the hum of the fridge. I sat there for like an hour just listening, waiting for it to happen again. It didn't. I don't know, maybe it was my brain short-circuiting from stress, or maybe it just crossed into some thin spot for a second. But sometimes, late at night, if I hold my breath just right, I swear I can still hear that buzzing start up again. The Woman in the Old Barn Dream. This is gonna sound nuts, but I figured I'd throw it out here because maybe somebody had something similar. A couple years back, I'm renting this tiny farmhouse out in rural Kentucky. My girlfriend at the time had already moved into town for work, so just me and the dog out there, about 6 months. That was while I was just wrapping things up. The house was drafty and smelled like old cedar, and the barn out back always gave me the creeps, but whatever, it was cheap. One night I had this dream, except it didn't feel like a dream. More like I'd just been dropped into another life. I was in the barn, but it wasn't falling apart like in real life. It was solid and swept clean. Tools hanging nice and neat. And there was this woman there with me. Dark brown hair pulled into a messy braid with gray sweatpants. And this oversized red flannel shirt. Nothing sexy or anything, but the whole thing felt domestic. Like we'd been together for years, and she was laughing at something dumb I said. I remember brushing hay off her sleeve, and I swear I can still picture her face. When I woke up, I had that heavy, someone's missing kind of feeling. Stuck with me for days. I know the feeling. Fast forward, maybe 3 weeks. My cousin drags me to a fish fry over at his buddy's place. We're sitting in the garage drinking light beer and talking about deer season. When the guy kinda zones out, starts talking about how he messed up the only real relationship he ever cared about back when he got hooked on pills. Says he still dreams about her sometimes. Then he goes quiet and looks straight at me and says, "She's always in that old barn, wearing that red plaid shirt." I almost dropped my beer. I didn't say anything at first because, how'd he even bring that up? Then he starts telling me about how in one of the dreams her brushing hay off of her arm and word for word my dream. Same barn, same clothes, even the dumb laughing. I didn't tell him I'd had the same dream. Hell, I haven't told anyone until now. I love my life. I'm not looking for some ghost girlfriend or whatever, but the way the air shifted in that garage, heavy like you could chew it, I don't think it was just coincidence. Still don't know what to make of it, and sometimes I drive past that old farmhouse and the barn's falling down more every year. Part of me wonders if she's still in there waiting. Well, I'm assuming she's alive. Although, you're insinuating something. The thing in the barn apartment. I don't generally tell this story much because it makes me sound like one of those people, but anyway. Back in 2021, I was renting this tiny apartment above an old horse barn in upstate New York. The landlord swore no animals had been there for decades, but it still smelled faintly like hay and something sour like damp wood. Anyway, around the time I got into this YouTube routine of doing breathing exercises before bed, I guess it was supposed to help with anxiety. Weird stuff started happening. About a week into it, I began catching flashes of movement along the slanted ceiling. Not bugs, not shadows from cars, like tall, quick shapes, always in the corner of my vision. Told myself it was probably just my brain relaxing too much, or maybe the crappy wiring throwing shadows. But then one night lying in bed, I noticed this smoky, almost fog-like patch hovering near the loft railing. It looked darker than the rest of the room, and I remembered thinking, why does it look thicker right where I used to keep my ex's jacket? Long stories, he left it there after a fight, and I never got around to tossing it. The part that freaked me out the most, though, was my dog Daisy. She's this lazy beagle who doesn't care about much. But one night she snapped her head up and tracked the same exact movement I'd just seen across the wall. Not like she heard something. Like her eyes were following it. She even gave this low whine, which she never does. Mostly happened when I was half asleep or jolting awake at 3 a.m., but it got to the point where I'd sit up with my heart racing, just waiting for something. Moved out after a few months for different reasons, mostly money. But I swear after I left that barn apartment it all stopped, and Daisy's been fine and I've been fine. Sometimes I wonder if it was stress or maybe barn dust messing with my head, but late at night, I still catch myself thinking, whatever it was, it stayed behind. The night my cat saw something I couldn't. This happened last winter, sometime after Christmas. I live in this old farmhouse on the edge of town in Kentucky. Just me and my cat Juniper. She's what you might call a lazy type, usually stretched out by the heater or asleep on my laundry pile. Doesn't care much besides food. But that night around 3 in the morning, she jolted awake and tore across the room like something had spooked her badly. At first, I thought maybe a mouse had gotten inside, which wouldn't be the first time. But she didn't chase anything. She just froze in the doorway, tail puffed out like a bottle brush. Then she starts this low growl I'd never heard from her before, like real guttural. She kept looking toward the back porch like she was watching something move outside. I got up thinking maybe a raccoon was on the porch, and the old screen door rattles a lot when the wind picks up. So I figured that's what it was. But when I pulled the curtain back, there was nothing, just yard and snow glittering under the porch light. Still, Juniper wouldn't budge. She crouched low, ears twitching, like she was tracking something invisible. Went on for maybe 20 minutes. Every time I thought she'd calm down, she'd whip her head toward the corner of the room or the dark window. At one point, she hissed at nothing, like really hissed. Claws out, back arched. And that made my stomach flip because she's never done that in her life. Eventually, she hopped into my bed, pressed right against me, and just stared at the ceiling for what felt like forever. I couldn't see or hear anything, but I swear the air felt heavier and colder. I even thought I smelled this weird metallic scent, like rusty water. Could have been my imagination. But by morning, she was back to normal, rolling in the sun like nothing happened. I envy that. But I've never forgotten it, and I still wonder what she saw. Sometimes when I wake up around 3 a.m., I catch myself listening for her breathing, waiting to see if she's going to do it again. Maybe it was nothing, maybe Kaz just sensed stuff. But I know one thing. Whatever she saw or heard that night, it was not just the wind. The barn house scratches. Has anybody ever had something in an old farm place follow them around? Like a couple years back, I moved into my grandpa's old barn house. It's out in rural Kansas. The place is kind of weird and smells like hay and mice no matter how much you clean it. But it had cheap rent, so I took it. I sleep in the loft room, the one with the tiny square window. Every night around 2 or 3, the old latch on the door rattles like somebody's trying to get in. It's not a knob, it's one of those iron hooks, so it shouldn't even jiggle on its own. At first, I thought it was the wind or the wood shrinking. Then I started waking up with scratches down my calf, like thin little lines. My dog sleeps on the floor, but he's fat and lazy and doesn't jump on the bed. He also doesn't have claws sharp enough for that. One night I even tucked the blanket under me real tight. Still woke up with fresh marks. I mentioned it to my mom when she came by, just casually, and she goes, "Oh, don't tell me it's scratching again." It was super offhand, and she said when she was a kid in that house, the light above the kitchen table fell straight down and smashed. Screws still being left in the ceiling. She also said doors would slam when no one was home, and her brother got shoved on the stairs once. They used to call it Old Man Pike, after some farmer who supposedly died in the hayloft in the 40s. She swore he just stomped around, banged on doors, and never hurt anybody. But the way she brushed it off like it was just part of living there made my stomach twist. I keep telling it out loud. Knock it off, I live here now. Like she suggested doing, but it doesn't help. Still got 3 scratches on my thighs last week and a neat row, and well, I don't do anything during the day that would leave bruises, but I find them on my ribs like somebody poked me too hard. I don't know, maybe I'm sleepwalking. Maybe it's stress, but sometimes I lie awake staring at that little square window. I swear I can hear someone breathing on the other side of that loft door. Strange light over the barn. A lot of barns today. So I don't usually post stuff like this, but it's been in my head for weeks, and maybe I'm writing it down, and maybe it'll just help stop replaying this. I live out in the country, middle of nowhere, Kansas. Sometimes at night I'll sit on the back steps of the barn to cool off. And it's quiet out here except for crickets and sometimes coyotes. Anyway, one night I'm just sitting there with a warm beer looking at the sky. You know how it is when you can actually see the stars without the city lights. It's like the whole sky is breathing. That's when I saw this light. At first I thought it was a plane, but it was too bright and too white. There's no sound, not a single engine noise. It just hung there, and then I don't know how else to say it, like it wobbled. Like when you drop a feather and it drifts side to side but slower. It would dip left and right and almost lazily, but somehow it also looked jittery, like a fly buzzing, but slowed down. I got this real cold feeling in my chest, like my body knew it wasn't right before my brain caught up. I told myself it was maybe a drone or some kid messing around, but there aren't kids for miles. And who the hell flies a drone at 11:30 on a Tuesday out here? The longer I watched, the closer it felt. Not like it zoomed in fast, more like it was drifting toward me. And I swear, the yard got quieter, like even the bugs shut up. That part scared me worse than the light itself. I didn't grab my phone, didn't record a thing, and honestly, I just froze up for a minute, then bolted back into the house like a coward. My wife laughed at me later when I tried to explain, but I couldn't get across how wrong it felt. I've seen shooting stars and satellites and even military planes out here. Wasn't any like that. Sometimes now when I sit out back, I half expect it to come wobbling back again. Haven't seen it since, but still catch myself glancing up too much. Weird how one little light can stick in your head like that. The night the ceiling moved. This happened when I was maybe 14. I was out at my grandma's old farmhouse. I used to stay there some weekends because my parents worked late shifts. Anyway, one night I was lying in bed in that upstairs room with the slanted ceiling, trying to read with a tiny flashlight under the blanket. It must have been close to midnight. I remember the crickets outside were loud and the house smelled like cedar again, because Grandma had those old closets. So I'm staring at my book, and out of the corner of my eye I noticed movement. Not like a bug or anything, but the actual ceiling. It was like the wood grain above me turned into liquid, like black threads twisting and knotting into each other. Almost like somebody had spilled ink in the water, but it was overhead. The light from my flashlight just stopped, like the ceiling was eating it. I froze. I was just gripping my blanket, and it got thicker and darker until I swear it dropped down a little, like a hanging sheet about to fall. My chest went ice cold, and then it rushed straight toward me. My whole body jerked, and I made this awful sound, like half scream, half hiccup, and then nothing. The ceiling was back to normal wood, and the flashlight worked fine, just showing dust motes. What in the world are dust motes? Mites? Well, that would be horrible to see. Somebody tell me what a dust mote is. The weirdest part is I checked the house next morning. Asked my grandma if she'd heard me yell. She said no, and well, that was wild because I know I wasn't quiet. I've heard my cousin scream bloody murder over a spider. Everyone in the house came running, but me, nothing. Everyone was silent. I still don't know what that was, and I've thought maybe I fell asleep with my eye open or had a nightmare. But I don't know. That farmhouse always had a strange feeling, like the air was thicker upstairs. Sometimes, if I think about it too much, I feel like I'm back there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to move again. The boy on the porch. So this is kind of weird, and I never really told anybody except my sister, but here we go. A few years back, I'm staying at this old rental place out in the sticks. It was one of those houses that had a sagging porch and a rusty screen door. The kind of place where every floorboard creaks like it's complaining about you. I wasn't doing great at the time. I was drinking too much. Not really working steady, just drifting. Nights were the hardest and too quiet out there, you know. Anyway, one night I had this dream, or maybe it wasn't a dream, I'm not really sure. In it, I woke up and I could see through the window by my bed and the porch light was off. The moon was bright enough that I could make out shapes. There was this kid, looked like maybe 9 or 10, sitting on the porch rail like he belonged there. He wasn't dirty or scrappy like a kid running around the woods would be. He was dressed sharp, like church sharp. White shirt, neat little vest, and even shiny shoes. He wasn't doing anything, just swinging his legs a little bit, I guess, and staring right in at me. At first, I thought maybe it was one of the neighbor's kids messing around, but then I noticed the eyes. They weren't right, like they were black. Not like dark brown, like black, all the way through. No whites, just these pits. It hit me in the gut. That kind of primal, oh, hell no, feeling you get when you realize something's off. My skin went cold and I couldn't move, and it was like being pinned. He leaned forward a little, hands gripping the rail, and I swear he smirked. Then he said real calm, like he was just making an observation. Nobody's ever gonna forgive you, not really. That stung, because at the time I was drowning in guilt about a bunch of stuff I'd screwed up. It felt like he knew it, or knew me, and then, this still makes me sort of shiver. He laughed and started as this regular kid laugh, high and light, and then it dropped low, like way too low. Like something way bigger was laughing through him. It vibrated like the sound came up through the wood of the porch itself. Next thing I know, I'm sitting straight up in bed sweating, staring at the empty window. The porch was empty too, and quiet as ever. The next morning, when I opened the front door, the porch rail had these 2 little scuff marks, like polished shoes had been swinging there. I don't know. Could have been a dream, could have been my head messing with me. I was in a bad spot. But I can still hear that laugh if I think about it too long. I don't sit out on that porch at night anymore. The backpack on the stairs. This happened when I was about 17. I was living in a small town. I was dating this guy who we're going to call Luke, and he was always into weird old folklore. He wasn't Wiccan or anything, but he had all these secondhand books about Appalachian magic and charms against spirits. Honestly, I thought it was just quirky, until this. So one Friday after school, Luke and I walked back toward my place. There's this tiny church graveyard that you have to pass, and he suddenly gets all excited like, "Oh, I gotta show you something." I should have said no, but when you're 17 and trying to be cool, you just go along with dumb stuff. He led me to this sunken grave, like real old. Just a rusted plate in the dirt, no headstone. He said the name out loud like it meant something, but I can't even remember it now. It was a woman, and that's all I remember. He pulls out this ratty canvas bag, this chipped glass jar, and a little brass bell, and one of those thick, cracked leather books that smell like mildew. He sits down right there and starts reading words I swear weren't English. I just stood there shifting my feet, watching clouds roll in. The air going cold all of a sudden. Then, no lie, a bunch of blackbirds and starlings maybe just swooped down and started circling over us, like 50 of them. I felt sick to my stomach. I told him I was going to wait by the road, and he barely nodded and just kept chanting. Anyway, later he comes out grinning like nothing happened, shoved his bag into my hands. We head to my house, and my folks worked evenings, so the place was empty. We're in my room, and his bag tossed by the dresser, and we're just fooling around like teenagers do. I just about managed to forget the graveyard thing when, bam, a massive shadow slides across my wall. It wasn't shaped right, though. Too tall, too bulky, like a person, but not. I froze, and Luke whispers, "Do you hear it?" I didn't, but then he presses his palms to my ears, and suddenly there's a voice in my head. Not with sound, but with thoughts. Clear as day, though. It said we didn't know what love was. That we were messing with things that we couldn't handle. And then it tells this whole story about killing someone in the same house years before we ever lived there. I swear my chest was going to explode. My heart was racing so hard. And then, like some cliche horror movie, my dad knocked on my door asking if we wanted pizza. The shadow just broke apart and it was gone. Luke and I didn't even look at each other. We just sat there like two scared little kids. Later, when Luke got ready to leave, we couldn't find his bag. Nowhere, not under the bed, not in the closet. We gave up and figured it would turn up. We walk out to the stairwell of our old creaky duplex, and there it is. His bag dumped out on the second floor landing, like scattered down the steps. The bell, the book, the jar just spread out like somebody had thrown it. But we'd never left my room. We scooped it all up in silence. He wouldn't even make any sort of eye contact with me. Well, didn't last much longer after that night. I still live in that town, and sometimes when I walk past that old graveyard, I get this heavy feeling in my chest. Like maybe it's watching me. Or maybe it's nothing. I don't know. The folks in the parking lot. So this happened a couple of years ago, but it still sits in the back of my head like a splinter. I was driving home late from work, and I do these night shifts at a warehouse outside of town. I figured I'd stop at this all-night diner off the highway. The place is kind of run down, old jukebox, doesn't even work, and smells like burnt coffee. But the pie is good. Keeps me awake for the drive at least. It must have been around 2:30 in the morning. I was the only one in there besides a trucker sleeping in his booth. Ate my pie, paid up, and went to head out. And that's when I saw them. 3 people, maybe 4, I couldn't tell, standing just outside near the soda machine by the door. They weren't dressed fancy, but their clothes, man, they were too clean, like ironed to death and spotless. Who looks that sharp at 2 a.m. with a greasy spoon? Their skin looked kind of strange too, like pale in a way that reminded me of wax, like candle wax, not just regular pale. When I pushed the door open, they all kind of shifted at the same exact time. Not stepped, but shifted, like the way mannequins might move if somebody dragged them a little bit to the side on rollers. Smooth, like too smooth. I froze with my key in my hand. All of them smiled at me, or at least I think that's what it was. But it didn't reach their eyes. Actually, I don't think their eyes even blinked. I hustled to the car like an idiot and slammed the lock down. The weird thing was no one else in the diner seemed to notice them at all. That trucker didn't stir, and the waitress didn't even look up. When I finally pulled out, my headlights caught them still standing there, heads turning in unison to watch me leave. My stomach dropped. And the part that really screws with me is I live 10 miles from that diner, out in a dirt road. When I pulled into my driveway, I swear on my life they're already there, just standing at the edge of the gravel, side by side facing my house. I didn't even get out of the car at first, but sat there shaking, radio buzzing static, even though it had been fine before. I must have sat for 20 minutes watching them in my rear view. They never moved closer. Well, never moved at all, really. Finally, when the first hint of daylight started peeking over the hills, they were gone. Like I blinked, driveway was empty. Told my brother about it later, and he just laughed and said it was just me being tired from night shift and seeing shadows. Maybe he's right, maybe I was, but I don't drive out to that diner anymore. And sometimes when I pull into my drive after a late shift, I still check the end of the gravel, just in case. The abandoned railway stop. So a couple of weeks ago, I ended up poking around this old train depot out in the middle of nowhere. It's one of those spots people in town joke about, but nobody actually goes to anymore. Like your classic roof half caved in, weeds pushing through the cracked floor, that kind of thing. At first it was just, creepy in the way an empty building is. Dust and broken glass, a couple of birds fluttering out of nowhere. But then while I was walking through the main hall, I swear the air just changed. Heavier, like breathing through a wet blanket. Thought maybe it was mold or something, but I didn't feel right. Lightheaded and kind of floaty, like I'd stood up too fast. There were these old benches lined up against the wall, and one of them sat like this busted-up suitcase. Nothing special, just leather peeling and a broken handle. But for some reason I couldn't stop staring at it. It honestly felt like it was staring back at me. I know that doesn't make sense. It's a suitcase, but every time I shifted, I felt watched. I mumbled something about not feeling good, and this guy who'd come along with us, a friend of a friend, he perked up and said he'd been seeing little flickers out of the corner of his eye since we walked in. Shadows that disappeared when he turned. Hearing him say that made my stomach knot up. Like, okay, it's not just me losing it. We left pretty quick after that. Outside, the air felt lighter and normal again, but I couldn't shake the feeling something in there didn't want us poking around. Weirdest part is, later that night when I was lying in bed, I could still picture that suitcase, like it had burned itself into my brain. I don't know, maybe it was just mold or maybe it was nerves. But I've been in plenty of old places before and never felt anything like that. I won't be going back, that's for sure. The thing in my grandpa's barn. This has been on my mind ever since I was talking with my cousin last week. We grew up spending summers at my grandpa's farm in southern Missouri, sort of in the middle of nowhere. It was always fun during the day, riding four-wheelers and helping him feed the cows. But at night, man, that barn was the creepiest place on earth. One summer, I must have been around 10, and me and my cousin both swore we saw these glowing orange-red eyes peeking out from the hayloft. Not like a cat or raccoon. I know what those look like. These were bigger and wider apart, and they didn't blink. just staring. And the weird part is, the loft didn't have any lights in it. No windows that face that direction. There's no way for cars, lights, or anything to shine through it. We didn't tell my grandpa right away because he would have just said we were city kids scaring ourselves. But later that night, my cousin couldn't shut up about it. He kept repeating, "They weren't blinking, man. They weren't blinking." I laughed it off, but honestly, I was terrified. Years later, we brought it up as adults at a family get-together, and my aunt, who used to live in that same house before us, straight up said she remembered seeing the same eyes in that barn when she was a teenager. She had simply thought it was her imagination back then, but when we told her what we saw, she went pale, like she wouldn't even go near the barn the rest of that trip. I don't know what the hell it was. Maybe some animal I've never seen, maybe something else. I try to convince myself it was just a kid's mind playing tricks, but then I think about how we all saw it years apart. And every time I smell hay, it comes back to me. That frozen feeling, like something was watching us from the dark. I'm still thinking about that pie that wakes you up that guy was talking about 2 stories earlier. The river trail thing. This happened a couple of summers back when I was staying at my uncle's place in Kentucky, and his house is right by this little river trail. The kind that's mostly dirt and roots and a lot of wet leaves in the middle of July. I used to walk it late at night and it was too hot inside to sleep. I don't know why I felt safer out there in the dark with the crickets and frogs than a sweaty house, but I did. One night, maybe around 11, my cousin said she'd come with me. We were just walking slow, talking about dumb stuff like if you could survive eating only Pop-Tarts for a year. Her idea, not mine. Also, yes, it's doable. At some point, she said that she needed to run back real quick for bug spray. She turned back toward the house. Or at least I thought she did, because maybe 2 minutes later I heard her calling me. But not from behind, like... Her voice came from up ahead deeper into the trees, like she'd already walked on without me. I figured maybe I'd zoned out and she'd slipped past, so I followed the sound. The weird part is, the more I walked, the closer it sounded. Like right there, just around the next bend. I kept saying, "Hold on, wait up." But she never answered. Just called my name again in the same tone, same exact way. When I finally stopped, kind of spooked, I clicked on my little flashlight. And that's when I saw it. The ground all around me had these prints in the mud. Bare feet, but small, like a child's. They circled me tightly, like whoever made them was just walking around me while I stood there. No tracks leading in, no tracks leading out, just a messy circle, like I'd been standing in the middle of a game. I swear my stomach dropped. I bolted back the way I came, tripping over roots. When I got back to the yard, my cousin was sitting on the porch steps with bug spray in her hand. Said she never went down to the trail at all. She'd been waiting for me the whole time. I don't go walking down there at night anymore, and sometimes still hear something. Like somebody calling my name from the woods when I'm out back. I try not to listen too hard. The thing by the barn. I live out in a small town, kind of middle of nowhere. My bedroom window faces the old barn on my parents' property. It's half collapsed, roof caved in years ago. So it's basically just a big shadowy skeleton sitting in the field. Anyway, for the past few months when I'm trying to sleep, I keep waking up in this weird way where I can't move. Like my chest feels heavy, like someone's sitting on me or pressing down. Sometimes I swear I can hear something dragging in the dirt outside, like a shovel scraping our boots, When I look, there's nothing. And the worst is when I feel this tug on my ankle like somebody's trying to pull me down on the bed. I can't stand it. I live alone in that room. Door locked, no one else around. The other night, it got real bad. I woke up, couldn't breathe right. Like something was sucking the air out of me. I could see the barn through the window, just blacker than black. And I got this absolute gut feeling that something was standing in there watching me. Not moving, just waiting. Couldn't even convince myself it was a dream because my dog, he sleeps at the foot of the bed and he's growling low, like really deep, staring at the window. He never does that. Sometimes I think maybe it's just my head messing with me or stress or whatever. But then why does my dog act weird too? He won't go near the barn during the day either. Just stands there whining if I try. My grandma used to say things like, get stuck in old places. Like barns and wells. I don't know if I believe in that stuff, but lately I'm not so sure. Sorry if this rambled, I just had to get it out somewhere. Anybody else ever feel like something's literally pulling them when they're asleep? The lantern in the barn. It's like a barn bonanza today. So this happened back when I was 11 or 12. I was out in my grandparents' farm in Iowa. They had this old barn that nobody used anymore, kind of leaned to one side with broken boards and bird nests all over. I used to go out there anyway because kids don't care about tetanus, I guess. One afternoon, I'm poking around, just kind of stacking up some rusty coffee cans I found, when out of nowhere, a metal oil lantern, like those old heavy ones, they slid right off of a beam and slammed into the dirt like 2 feet away from me. Only thing is, there wasn't any shelf or ledge up there it could have been sitting on. It was just rafters and cobwebs. I remember just standing there with my mouth open thinking maybe a raccoon pushed it. But it was way too heavy for that. Bolted back to the house, told my grandma, and she just said, well, the barn's got memories of its own. Kept shucking corn like she didn't even hear me properly. The second thing I don't really remember myself, but my cousin swears by it. It was the week after my grandpa died, and I guess I was playing by myself in the living room. I was talking to somebody who wasn't there. Cousin said I was looking at the empty recliner and saying things like, I'll tell Grandma, and okay, I'll feed the cats. Then apparently I hummed a little tune my grandpa used to whistle when he was outside doing chores. I don't recall any of that. But my cousin said it freaked him out pretty badly. I tried to make sense of it over the years, and I don't think it was my grandpa, honestly. He wasn't sentimental in life. Don't know why he'd stay after. Part of me thinks farms just had this heavy feeling. All those years of people living and working and dying there, like it had to let something out once in a while. I don't know. It's not like anything else weird happened, just those couple of times. And then it was quiet again. The man at the barn window. A little bit strange to type out, but I've been thinking about it all day, so. Back when I was 7 or 8, we lived on this old farm property my grandparents used to own. Like the other barns, it smelled like hay all the time. The windows rattled when trucks went by on the road, and my room was at the back facing the barn. At night, I'd sometimes wake up and see this figure at the window, always the same. Tall, shoulders kind of sloped, wearing what looked like one of those wide-brimmed hats. I couldn't see details, just a dark outline against the moonlight. He never came in, never moved closer, just stood there like he was checking on me. I remember pulling the blanket over my face so many times, convinced maybe if I'd looked again, he'd be gone. But sometimes he wasn't gone. He'd still be there, just standing. And here's the thing, though. I wasn't exactly scared of him. Creeped out, yeah, but didn't feel like he wanted to hurt me. Almost the opposite, like he was just watching, making sure I was okay. Other thing is, my sister, well, she admitted later that she used to see him too. She said he'd be out by the barn door for her, just leaning like he was waiting. Never told each other when it was happening because we thought we'd sound crazy. And that was around the time my dad lost his job and there's a lot of yelling in the house. Mom cried a lot in the kitchen when she thought we were asleep, and looking back, I can't help but wonder if the figure had something to do with all that. Like he only showed up when things were really rough. Sometimes I laugh about it now, like, what kind of ghost just hangs around in a hat doing nothing? But every once in a while, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I still half expect to see him at the window. The old diner job. This was a while back, maybe 10 years ago. I was working at this little roadside diner in Pennsylvania. Nothing glamorous, greasy plates, coffee pots that never stopped burning, and those booths with the red vinyl that always stuck to the back of your legs if it was hot. I kind of liked it, though. Folks who came in were regulars and truckers mostly. And me and the other servers had our little inside jokes about who ordered the same pie every Tuesday, or who always left the tiniest tip. Anyway, I was really into fishing at the time. I'd get off my shift around midnight and drive out to this creek. Just sit under the stars with my line in the water and listening to crickets. Talked about it a lot at work, probably too much, but anybody knew, or rather, everyone knew that I wasn't pouring coffee. I was out by the water. Then I get this dream, and the weirdest thing is just 3 words. Leave, leave, leave. Woke up with my heart racing like I'd been running. I brushed it off at first, but the words stuck in my head all day. The next shift I walked in, hung up my apron halfway through, told my boss I was done. Didn't even know why, I just left. A couple of months later, I run into one of the cooks at the gas station. Tells me the owner and some of the staff got busted. Apparently, there was this whole mess of money laundering and stolen cash running through the place. Big, ugly situation. Some of the people I'd worked side by side with were right in the middle of it. While they were sneaking money around, I'd been chatting away about how I spend my nights fishing, pulling my own catch out of the water. I don't know why, but it hit me like how weird it was. Like my little hobby mirrored what they were doing, but in this crooked way. That dream probably kept me out of something nasty. I'm not saying it was supernatural, but sometimes it feels like something had my back just whispering, "Get out." And I did. Old Farmhouse in Ohio. I know I don't post much, but I guess I just need to get this off my chest. Years ago, my wife and I moved into this creaky old farmhouse in Ohio. Belonged to her uncle before he passed. It was one of those places with drafty windows and floors that complained every time you walked on them. We thought we'd fix it up, and make it ours. First weird thing was while I was fixing up the kitchen cabinets, I swore I kept seeing somebody ducking past the doorway. Like just the edge of the woman's dress, and it was pale. Like those cotton nightgowns old ladies wear. I even went outside thinking some neighbor wandered in. Small town, doors don't always get locked, but nothing. Checked the whole house. Nada. Even blamed it on paint fumes. So I got the place out and all, but kept happening. That glimpse in the corner of my eye. I told my wife's cousin about it, and he just goes, "Oh, that's May, she died here. She's probably gonna leave you alone if you don't bother her." Like it was no big deal. I laughed it off, but honestly, I didn't sleep right that week. A couple of months in, I'm sitting in our room while my wife's in the shower. Closet doors open, nothing unusual. Then I noticed the hanger swaying. Thought it was just a draft from the bathroom fan. Next thing I know, clothes and her dresses, which weren't mine, just started sliding off the hangers one by one, and then tossed out. Stood there like an idiot holding the TV remote. By the time my wife came out, everything looked normal again, but I could feel that thick, that weight in the room. The basement was the one that really got under my skin. I'd be down there folding laundry and I'd hear this heavy stomping above me, like somebody pacing the living room. Real slow, heel to toe, heel to toe. Dog didn't bark and my wife was napping upstairs. I go up, she's still out cold, dog too, doors locked, nothing outside. Tried telling myself it was the house settling, but come on, houses don't pace. And then, this is what broke me. I was on the bed with my wife, dog curled at her feet. We're watching some dumb sitcom when his squeaky ball, which was laying the rug across the room, lifted and rolled into the bed. Not a bounce, not us kicking it by accident, just came at us. The dog perked up, wagging like it was playtime. Then the damn ball shot across the room again like somebody threw it. He chased it, tail wagging like nothing was weird, and I just stared at my wife and she stared back. We didn't even joke about it. And I've lived in plenty of old houses, but that one, I don't know. I still think about May when I fold laundry, like she's waiting for me to notice her. The lady in the barn. Years ago, I was feeding the horses late, almost midnight. We had this old wooden barn out back, the kind that creaks when there's no wind. I remember I was half asleep just throwing hay, thinking about how I should have done it earlier. Anyway, I had this weird nudge, I don't know how to explain it, like when you feel someone behind you even though nobody is. So I looked up toward the loft, and I swear I saw this woman standing there. Not on the floor, though. More like balanced on the top rail where no person should be standing. Her arms are stretched wide, not like she's trying to scare me, but more like displaying something. And then she did this thing. Raised her arms up, kind of like the way you start a jumping jack or when kids imitate birds. Then she was gone, and just gone. No sound, no shadow, no nothing. It was maybe a second, maybe two, but enough that I dropped that damn hay fork. My first thought was, I'm overtired and it's nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. Went back inside trying to shake it off, and my wife is still up knitting on the couch. She gave me that look like she knew something was off, and I didn't want to say it, but I asked her, "You notice anything weird tonight?" She hesitated, which freaked me out more than if she'd said no. She finally told me that when she went into her daughter's room earlier, there was this pinkish glow near the dresser. Not headlights, not a toy light, just a strange soft flash that faded. She almost didn't say anything because she thought maybe she was overtired too. We just sat there in silence after that, like neither of us wanted to push it further. I still don't know what to make of it. The barn's long gone now, collapsed into a storm. But sometimes I wonder if that woman's still out there, arms stretched wide and waiting. The Thing on the Dirt Road. This might sound dumb, but it stuck with me. I was 13. Me and my cousin used to mess around with our bikes on this dirt road near my grandma's place. It wasn't really a road anymore, more like a half-forgotten trail with weeds grown up in the middle. We'd race down it and try to skid out at the end, stupid kid stuff. One summer evening it was hot, and I remember because the sweat made my shirt stick to my back. I let my cousin go first, and he's pedaling hard down the road, and I'm just standing there with a stick, trying to whack his back. At least when he zoomed past, which was our version of fun. He takes off around the bend, and I'm waiting, and that's when I see, I don't even know how to say it right. There was this tiny figure, like a kid-sized one, but not, coming toward me on some kind of, toy car. Maybe one of those plastic ride-ons. But it was moving way too fast for something like that. At first I thought it was another neighborhood kid. But then I noticed the face. Big wide grin, teeth that didn't look right. Eyes that just looked too alert, too fixed on me. I froze. It started circling me in the dirt and wheels kicking up dust round and round. My cousin came back around the bend a second later and yelled, "The heck is that?" I know he saw it too. That thing stopped, turned its head real slow, and then just shot off into the woods, still grinning. We never saw it again. This was like 20 years ago now. We still bring it up sometimes, and laugh about it sometimes. But honestly, when I think too hard, I get that same crawling feeling in my spine. Like something's still watching from the trees, and yeah, it's dumb, but every time I walk that way, I speed up a little bit just in case. The figure by the cornfield. So this is kind of weird, and I'm not sure if anybody will even believe me, but I swear it happened. Last summer, my nephew, he's 13 and thinks he's tough, poking around the shed out back and found this old slingshot my dad used to mess with raccoons. He strutted around like he'd found a treasure. Anyway, he goes stomping out toward the back porch, and right as he steps off the last board, he freezes. He said there was someone or something, tall, standing just by the edge of the corn. Whole body was pale, like blinding pale, except it had this darker patch across the chest, like a coat or something left open. Not much color anywhere else, just white like chalk white. Didn't even try to shoot it or anything, just dropped the slingshot and yelled, "Uncle Joe, what the hell is that?" He bolted inside, slammed the screen door so hard it popped off the hook, and I've never seen that boy scared of anything before. Snakes, storms, whatever. He's always laughing it off. But that night he was pale as paper. He swears as soon as the thing noticed him, it ran. Said it moved fast. Like way too fast for a person, headed straight into the corn. Later, when I went out to check, sure enough, there was this huge patch of stalks bent down, like something heavy had been rolling around there. Not neat, not like a deer bedding, or it was all messy and chewed up. And before anybody says it, yeah, we do get deer and coyotes too. Sometimes even a stray dog, and I've hunted all my life out here. This was none of those things. The corn was mashed flat in a wide circle, way bigger than anything I've seen an animal do. And we've been here almost 6 years, never saw anything like it. That night, though, every hair on my arm stood up when I walked back there. Just too quiet. Even the crickets weren't making noise. Maybe a trick of the light, maybe a spooked raccoon, but why the bent-down corn? The Old Creek Trail. This happened like 3 years ago. Maybe 2.5, I can't remember exactly. But it was late October because the leaves were doing that really dramatic orange thing. Yeah, real dramatic. I live in this small town in Kentucky near a bunch of hollers and old farms that are mostly abandoned, and there's a trail by the creek that I used to walk when I needed to clear my head. It's not official, just a path people and deer carved out over time. That day I was alone, headphones in my hoodie pocket because they died so I could actually hear everything. The wind was pushing leaves around, and every now and then I'd hear water splashing from the creek. And at some point I heard a sharp crack, like a stick breaking. I froze because there aren't many people out there, and if there are, they're usually carrying a rifle. I turned and swear I saw someone, well, not someone, more like a little figure dart behind a tree. It wasn't a hunter, not in camo or blaze orange. This thing was in this old brown coat. Kind of like what you'd imagine in a pioneer reenactment. Hood pulled up and it ran in this weird skipping way. Thought my brain was tricking me, honestly. I even laughed to myself like, great, I'm seeing goblins now. But I couldn't shake it. I went home pretty quick after that, just kind of unsettled, and my cousin came over that night, and when I mentioned it, he didn't laugh. He said there have been stories about little people in the woods around here forever. My grandma used to talk about them too. I always figured that was just folklore she carried from her side of the family. And I don't know what I believe. I mean, I go to church and all that, so part of me kind of feels weird even saying this out loud. But I know I saw something that didn't fit. Every time I walk past that spot, I catch myself glancing around, like maybe I'll see that hood again. Probably nothing, probably just my eyes playing tricks, and still, haven't walked that trail alone since. The barn cat thing. So, this might sound dumb, but it's been on my mind, and I live out at my grandpa's old farm. Nothing fancy, just a couple of sheds, an old red barn, and too many raccoons. Anyway, I've got this cat named Daisy. She's one of those half-feral barn cats that kind of adopted me instead of the other way around. Lately, she's been doing this weird thing. Every night around the same time, like 11, maybe closer to midnight if I lose track, she sits by the barn door and just wails. Not the regular hungry meow or the let me in kind. It's long and drawn out, almost like she's calling for something. Sometimes she scratches at the wood too, like she's desperate. So I'd go out there with the flashlight, thinking maybe a raccoon's messing with her or something. But as soon as I show up, there's nothing. She goes dead quiet, looks at me like I'm the crazy one, just slinks off like she was never making a sound. And it happened 4 nights in a row. Part that gets me, though, is my grandpa used to tell me the barn was quote-unquote busy. Never explained it, just laughed it off, but he'd keep the doors locked after dark, even though there's nothing worth stealing in there. Never thought much about it, but last night when Daisy was doing her crying thing, I swear, I heard not voices exactly, but a low hum from inside. Could have been wind through the boards, I don't know. I shined the flashlight inside and there was nothing. Just empty hay and shadows. And there's probably nothing right. Well, old wood creaks and cats are dramatic. Maybe she's just hearing mice or something. But it's the way she stops the second I show up, like whatever she's meowing at disappears when I'm there. Can't shake the thought that maybe Grandpa wasn't just joking when he said the barn was busy. Anyway, I'm probably overthinking it. Cat's back at the door tonight like clockwork, and I'm sitting here pretending I don't hear her. The day my grandpa's chair wasn't empty. This has been kind of on my mind. I live in this old farmhouse my grandparents used to own. It does all the things maybe an old farmhouse might do, but this little bit was different. It was one of those days where my head felt like it was a vice. Been splitting wood all morning, and I came inside just wanting to close my eyes for 10 damn minutes. My wife had gone into town with her daughter, so it was just me in the quiet. I lay down on the couch, boots still on, figuring I'd nap a little bit before dinner. There's this rocking chair in the corner of the living room. It belonged to my grandpa. He died in that same house, not in the chair though, but still. Nobody sits in it anymore. It just feels wrong, you know. Anyway, I'm half dozing, listening to the fridge hum, and the wind rattling the window. I hear the chair creak. At first, I tell myself old houses shift and wood does pop, but whatever. It doesn't stop. It's the sound of the chair rocking slow and steady, like someone real heavy sat down. I keep my eyes shut because I don't know, I didn't want to deal with it. Then I hear the sound of boots on the floor, not my boots. I know that sound. These were softer and heavier. And then, I swear to God, I felt like someone leaned down over me. I could smell that faint old tobacco smell my grandpa used to carry in his shirts. And I felt a forehead press against mine. Not gentler either, firm, like a dad checking if you're running a fever. Snapped my eyes open, ready to cuss my brother out. I thought he was screwing with me. The room was empty and the chair was still. Fan humming normally, just me and the couch heart pounding. I keep telling myself I was dreaming, but the touch felt too solid and too there and hadn't even really drifted yet. Ever since, I avoid napping in that room. My wife thinks I'm being dramatic, but she wasn't there. My daughter asked me last week if Grandpa still smokes in the corner, and she's 6 and never saw him alive. Maybe it's an old house holding old memories. The bus stop in the rain. This was 2 years ago, back when I was maybe 20. I'd just quit a job at the lumber mill and was bouncing around town trying to figure out what the hell I was doing with my life. Didn't have a car then. My Ford finally gave up and I didn't have a car to fix it. Well, didn't have the cash to fix it. So I took buses everywhere and Greyhounds mostly. Anyway, one night I was stuck waiting for a transfer in this small city up north. Not even a real station, just one of those sad little bus stops that's basically a bench under a busted streetlight. It was drizzling and I had this cheap nylon duffel bag with all my stuff for the week. My coat smelled like wet dog from the rain and I remember kicking at the gravel just to keep my legs moving. The next bus wasn't due until 4 in the morning, so I was pretty much screwed. And around midnight, this older guy comes up and he looks like he was in his 60s and tall and wore a long brown coat even though it wasn't that cold. He asked me if this was where the 5 a.m. bus to Chicago came. I said yeah. He kind of smiled like he already knew that. We sat there talking a while and he had this calm way of speaking. Really slow, like he was chewing on every word before letting it out. Said he was going to see his daughter in Indiana. Told me about how she used to sing in the church choir and how proud he was. It was nice, honestly. I didn't feel so alone after that. At one point, he pulled out a little pocket watch and showed it to me. Nothing fancy, just silver with scratches all over it, and he said, "This keeps me on time, always has." I remember laughing because the bus was 5 hours away. What good's a watch then? When the bus finally rolled up, I grabbed my duffel and got on. Driver took my ticket and I dropped into a seat by the window. Thought I'd wave goodbye to the guy, just to be polite. When I turned around, the bench was empty. Now this bus stop was in the middle of a wide open parking lot. Nowhere to go unless you wanted to run across the highway. I swear I only looked away for maybe 30 seconds and he was just gone. Sometimes I tell myself maybe he slipped into maybe a car that pulled up or something, but I don't remember hearing anything. And it's weird because later on I realized my phone had died before he even showed up. But somehow I remember checking the time on it after he left. Except it was the exact time that was in his pocket watch. I don't know what to make of that night. I just felt like somebody else showed up to keep me company when I needed it most. Then vanished before I could even say thanks. Sweet dreams.
Welcome to a world where the veil between realms is lifted. Paranormal M is your guide to authentic encounters with the supernatural. Subscribe and turn on notifications to embark on a mesmerizing journey into the unknown. We rented a house, never really felt like home. You always felt creeped out walking in there, like you were being watched. My boyfriend and our roommate both worked nights, so I would be there by myself a lot. One night I was doing my usual stuff and watching some TV before bed, and I had this overwhelming feeling all night that I should avoid the hallway and not look directly down it. It was creepy. The feeling of being watched and terrified lasted for about 2 hours before I decided to suck it up and make my way to my room. I left the hallway lights on and went to bed. Just as I turned to the side table light, I heard a drawer being pulled out and hitting the stopper. I turned on the light and nothing was out of place. This went on about 6 times before I decided I was sleeping with the light on. I curled up underneath the covers and waited for my boyfriend to get home. He comes rolling in around 3 a.m. and he's laughing at me for being such a pussy. He gets into bed, turns the light off, and that's when hell broke loose. All the doors down the hallway slammed shut one by one. Then our closet door started rattling. The sound coming from inside could only be described as a total destruction. It sounded like shelves, the pole, and everything in there was being tossed around. The boyfriend joined me underneath the covers and we were both terrified. After it stopped, it took 5 to 10 minutes to convince him to go check around the house. Nothing was out of place, and our roommate had drove 3 hours back home that night to be with his family, so we knew that it couldn't be him. We slept with the light on the rest of the night and moved out soon after. I still can't drive by that house without being creeped out. Ask Reddit 2. I just moved out, living with a good buddy and a guy that moved in before I did. The guy was a bit strange, but I didn't really think anything of it. One night he asks if I want to help do the dishes. I agree, and he says that we need to get high first. Now, I'm a casual smoker, but he pulled out shatter. It was my bad for even trying it, let alone not asking about it first. Just heard about it. I did a tiny bit and got fucked out of my skull, and he starts telling me about it. This is when I start feeling creeped out. We start doing dishes. I'm having trouble even moving, and he's telling me about how he's fried himself. Drank shroom tea before his construction job every day and did acid nearly every day afterwards. I started getting minor visuals because I'm so high, and his face was creeping me the fuck out. He begins asking me questions like, "Do you consider yourself a lucky person? Have you ever had to go to the ER?" And the one that fucked with me the most was, "Do you love the door to your room?" At that point I said fuck it and went for a sit at the park across the street to clear my head. He moved out 2 weeks after. I then get a text from my good buddy saying to check the news story, and sure enough, there was the creepy roommate, convicted of manslaughter. I've never had a bigger chill run down my spine. Ask Reddit 3. This happened about last week. My girlfriend and I were sleeping in her dorm, which is a ground level one, and it's right next to the door to the building. At around 4:30 in the morning, we were both woken up by someone singing loudly outside. Like, really loudly, as loud as they could. It almost sounded like opera music, as they were just trying to be as loud and sustaining as long as they could. We could hear them coming closer and closer. Then they just started screaming. They would get to the last note of their song and just start screaming as loud as they could, just over and over again. Eventually they got to the door right next to her room, with the window open and the bed right beside it. It sounded like they were right next to us. It was so loud and terrifying. Soon they moved on, still singing and screaming. They went over to the other side of the building, and the RA went out of the door to tell them to shut up. We talked to the RA the next day, and she said that when he came around the corner and she saw him, he was butt-ass naked, no shoes, no underwear, nothing. She said he started to come towards her, and she slammed the door and called the university police. Even though their building was right next to ours, they didn't find the guy. We didn't sleep well the rest of that night. Ask Reddit 4. It was a Friday evening, maybe around 6 p.m. I was walking my dog through the woods, and I was wearing headphones. I used to walk her all the time on this route, so no reason to be afraid. It was very rare to see anyone else walking at this time of day, on a Friday. Actually, why I chose to walk her then. And I'm coming down through this field and valley when all of a sudden I start to feel on edge. The feeling just kept getting worse, so I turned off my iPod and took my headphones out. I was half jogging by the time I got to the bottom of this field. My dog had taken off way ahead of me at this point. I squeezed through a hole in the fence and onto a dirt path surrounded by trees, took the usual right and kept checking behind me. Well, here's the horrifying part. I keep turning around to check if anyone's behind me, and I see someone, or some shadow-like figure, which is more what it looked like, flick from behind one tree to behind another big oak tree. I think I audibly yelped at this point, but I kept power walking away. I was still fairly close to whoever or whatever this was, and tiny teenage me knew that I was unlikely to be able to outrun this thing. I kept walking a few more paces before turning around again. This goddamn thing is now standing right in the center of the path, further back near that tree. It has its arms straight down but out from its sides. Its hands were fists, and it stood with a wide-legged stance. I say thing because it looked like a shadow of a man. It looked like it had a cloak and a whitish-brimmed hat, but the whole figure was completely opaque. It just looked angry, and it's staring right down the path at me. Needless to say, I sprinted home from there and practically had a panic attack when I made it back. No idea what it was, but I know what I saw. This was in the UK, and an urban legend about that wood, and that crossroad area in particular, is that they used to hang people back on that oak tree way back when. Whatever the hell it was, it's not something I'll ever forget. Shadow people in the windows. Amidst the whispers of the house on center, a haunting secret lay hidden beneath the sprawling yard. After my grandfather purchased the adjacent lots, tearing down the house next door, the expansion brought about unforeseen consequences. Shadow people emerged, their elusive forms haunting the darkness of the night. My grandmother's love for her yard was unparalleled. She transformed it into a vibrant sanctuary, cultivating a variety of plants and nurturing a young willow tree that would one day provide a sheltered haven for my childhood adventures. Little did we know that these improvements would disturb the restless spirits lurking in the shadows. As a child, my bedroom occupied the space that once served as the funeral home's viewing room. Similarly, my mom had slept in that room during her younger years. This connection to the house's past seemed to amplify the supernatural encounters that awaited us. Night after night, I would lie down to sleep, oblivious to the eerie presence that surrounded me. On one fateful night, I heard a voice calling my name, echoing through the halls of the house. Thinking it was my grandmother summoning me to the kitchen, I obediently arose from my bed to venture to the living room. But what awaited me sent a chill down my spine. Through the windows, I saw a multitude of shadow people, their silhouettes hauntingly peering into the house. Frozen in fear, I could do nothing but stare back at their unsettling gaze. Just as panic threatened to consume me, The voice called my name once more, jolting me back to reality. I sprinted into my grandmother's bedroom, screaming in terror. She comforted me, dismissing my experience as a mere nightmare, unaware of the chilling truth that awaited further exploration. In conversation with my mother, I discovered the eerie history of the demolished house that had once stood next door. It appeared that the shadow people had been bound within its walls, visible through the windows even before the house's demolition. Now freed from the physical structure, they roamed the property, their presence felt in the dark corners of the yard. I was a bit curious as I learned that these ethereal figures would wander aimlessly, their eyes fixated on the windows of our home. Over the years, the encounters with the shadow people became almost routine. Each night I would catch glimpses of their dark forms meandering through the yard, their gaze fixated upon the house. Though their presence had become somewhat familiar, a lingering unease remained. No matter how much I tried to ignore them, I could never shake the feeling of being watched. The last time I saw them in that yard, I was 14 years old, and by then, I had grown accustomed to their spectral company, developing a peculiar acceptance of their presence. They no longer elicited the same paralyzing fear that had gripped me as a child, yet, as I bid farewell to the house on Center, I couldn't help but wonder about the nature of these enigmatic shadow people. What secrets did they hold, and what connection did they have to the unearthly forces that plagued our haunted house? The Rotten Man. My first trip to Florida with my grandpa was to visit family that lived there. It was after my grandma died. He picked me up from school and said that we were going on a trip. I was excited to see something different after being in that house. At the time, I was really getting into researching the occult as well, to gain an understanding of my abilities and what we were experiencing on Center Street. The time away wasn't a reprieve for my experiences. The field by my uncle's house, that they hunt in for rabbits, was known for wandering spirits. My cousins and I decided to stay outside one night and wait for them to wander through the foggy field. After hours of waiting, I saw a shadow wander through the field. I instantly was reminded of the shadow people on Center Street. All my cousins but one ran. He and I were both more curious than afraid. So I thought, and he spoke up, "I don't see anything out there." We both laughed as we walked back to the house. He was a skeptic when it came to the paranormal, understandably. After the trip, they decided to follow us back to Ohio for a few days. Coming back to that house left me feeling sick to my stomach. The night we decided to play in the yard, I really didn't want to, but still being young, I was convinced. We walked into the very backyard, which resembled a sort of junkyard, with my grandpa's habit of collecting. We were discussing my experience in the yard, and the same cousin, unafraid, was sure that I was making it all up. The rain began to fall, and I instantly got goosebumps, like I have so many times when a spirit was around. This time it was like every fiber of my being wanted to run. "Do you feel that?" The words came out of my mouth as lightning fell close by. It made what I was feeling visible, in my opinion, to both me and my cousin. It was a man wearing a jumpsuit, at least 7 or 8 feet tall. His eye sockets were empty, and his skin was like gray leather stretched across his face. Those few moments were enough to make us run for the house. I didn't go back there again until weeks later to retrieve the shoes that came off my feet. This was the only time I saw this entity so detailed. I'm sure it was the energy from the storm that allowed it to manifest so clearly. I say that because I don't think this entity was ever human. It was one of the many dark spirits that roam the property, appearing as contorted humans to cause fear, their favorite food source. When I was 15, and my best friend Nora shared the same dream. My friend Nora and I were best friends, and we were readers of occult books and witchcraft metaphysics, Ouija boards, and tarot cards. Just typical interest young teen such as ourselves had. We were co-babysitting children one weekend, and we fell asleep on the trampoline outside. I woke up frightened that I had a bad dream, and Nora woke up asking, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, why?" She said I was dreaming of you being chased in the woods. Some man was chasing you. You rammed into a coveted bridge and jumped into the backseat of a car. I was like, what? I too dreamt that I was being chased by an unknown man, and I was wearing a red coat, and I did run into a covered bridge. And when he caught up to me and opened the door, I jerked awake. My mouth was wide open in disbelief. She said, "You were wearing a red coat." I said, "Yeah, I was." I said, "Where were you? I never saw you in the dream." She said I was hiding behind a tree watching all of this happen. This was the single most amazing or crazy thing that ever happened to me. Is there a name for that? Ask Reddit. I was taking care of my grandparents' cat for the week. There were 2 cats, but one got ran over after falling from a tree. I go feeding her, and it was probably 9 in the evening. Pretty dark. Had my dog with me. I unlock the door, feed the cat, cuddle a bit with her, and then go away. I close the door and turn the key. The door does 2 click sounds when being locked, because the house is an old village house from the late 1800s. I hear the 2 clicks. I try to open it, of course, locked. I walk away. My dog comes with me. 6 steps. I didn't come further. I hear the 2 clicks. I turn around. The door opens. I can see how it swings back to the inside of the building. My dog starts growling, getting more and more aggressive. I get back to the door and lock it again. Once again, I go away. Suddenly, my dog flees. Before I even know what happens, the garage light turns on and the hallway lights as the window gets bright. Then the driveway lamps as well. I noped out. Called my dog, who was home already. Came back the next morning. The light was off. The door was unlocked. 3 light bulbs exploded. There is a backstory, but the comment gets too long if I post it as well. Number 2 that made me believe in ghosts. No, not that number 2. My grandparents visit the Harz Mountains in Germany because of the famous witch culture there. They always buy a witch puppet, about maybe around 40 centimeters large. They look odd, big noses, weird eyes. They gave one of our family as a gift, and it stood in the hallway. 1 week, 2 weeks, nothing happens. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, still nothing. 5 weeks, I can't sleep, and I get to the toilet, and as I approach the staircase, I can hear a cackle from the hallway below, where the puppet stands. I got back to sleep, and next morning the puppet wasn't there, where we had put it. It moved through the hallway, right in front of the kitchen door. We put it back to its socket, and the week counter resets. 2 weeks later, we find it standing in the middle of the hallway. As a tech nerd, I'm suspicious and mount an old phone with a security camera's firmware so that way I can get this thing to be triggered by its movement. After 4 weeks of no suspicious activity, the camera manages to catch a clip of how the witch puppet starts sliding over the floor. It goes to 2 or 3 locations and then stands still next to the morning. Stand still till next morning. It got banned to the attic soon after that. We've had it for about 5 years, but when we get there, the puppet sometimes is in another location or softly cackles as we turn the attic lights off. My sister saw me in 2 places at the same time. Yesterday I was in my bedroom with my younger sister and I was braiding her hair. It was taking a long time and I really had to use the bathroom, so I told her to give me a minute and I walked out. It's important to keep in mind I didn't tell her where I was going, what I was doing, or how long I would be gone. I just got up and went straight to the bathroom. I was in there for about 10 minutes because I had gotten into an argument with my friend over text, which is important to note because it doesn't normally take me that long to use the bathroom. After I'm finished, I walk out of the bathroom to wash my hands. Our sink's on the outside. But when I walked out, I was in direct view of my sister because the sink is across from my bedroom door. As I was washing my hands, I noticed that she was staring at me with a perplexed look on her face. So I asked her what was wrong. She calmly asks me how I could have walked out of the bathroom. This was a very oddly worded question, so I asked her what she meant. She asked me, "Weren't you just in the living room?" And I told her, "No, I've been in the bathroom the whole time." My sister began to look very sick as she told me, "I just talked to you in the living room. When did you walk to the bathroom?" In a very concerned tone, I insisted to her that I did not enter the living room, and since I had gotten up and walked out of the bedroom, there was no point in which I had entered the living room. I asked her what I, quote unquote, had said to her when she saw me in the living room. She tells me that she saw me sitting on the couch with my hands neatly folded, and I was staring off into space. She then told me that I had a very disturbed and concerned look on my face, which prompted her to ask me what was wrong, to which she claimed I responded, "Nothing," in an eerie tone. My sister claims that the me that she had been looking at looked just like me. My hair was in a loose bun, I was wearing some gray shirt and old red pajama pants. My face was the same and everything was the same, but it wasn't me. I know it wasn't me because I have no recollection of that happening. I was in the bathroom the entire time, distracted by my heated discussion. I have no idea how this happened, but my sister told me after our exchange, she felt nauseous, like something was off. I'm not sure what to make of this. I'm a pretty rational person, and I've heard stories like this before, and I want to look into the possible carbon monoxide poisoning because it's been known to cause hallucinations. However, only my sister has experienced this. Neither me nor my roommate have ever seen anything out of the ordinary. We've been theorizing about parallel universes, possession, demons, curses, but we really don't know what's exactly going on here. We're just looking for some answers. My grandfather's ex-girlfriend wasn't human. I'm a bit of a skeptic about this story, but the more I thought about it, the more horrifying it is. So for a bit of background, I'm half Filipino and half American. Every summer, my parents and I would visit the Philippines and usually stay at my grandparents' place. A week ago, my grandpa on my mom's side told me this true story from his youth. The way he said it, I noticed that he was still shaken and scared from whatever it is that happened. So here's the story. Back in 1970, when my grandpa was 18, he was dating this girl who was a year younger than him for over a year. Let's call this girl S. S was beautiful, sweet, kind, and easy on the eyes, according to him. When summer started, S invited him to her parents' home in the province. S was currently staying with her aunt while she went to school in my grandpa's town. My grandpa was skeptical at first because the area that S lived in was quite rural and would take 5 hours to arrive by bus. My grandpa was infatuated with S, so he said, why the hell not? So with permission from his parents, he packed up and he and S were on their way. When they arrived at her hometown, he noticed that a lot of people were staring at them. It was a small town and the population wasn't that big. S showed him around where the shops were, the diners, but Grandpa would notice people staring at them. And one time he heard a couple whisper, "Aswang." If you're wondering what the hell an aswang is, in Filipino folklore, an aswang is a malevolent, shape-shifting, flesh-eating monster. From what I learned, by the day they look and act like normal people. However, at night they reveal their true selves. Back to the story. So S and Grandpa arrived at S's house. It was a large 3-story wooden home. Grandpa then met S's parents. They greeted him warmly and invited him in, and they exchanged talks over dinner. Grandpa said that they seemed like a couple of nice, normal people. On the first night, he was sleeping in S's room on the 2nd floor. Grandpa woke up hearing a strange noise. The first thing he noticed was that S was gone. He assumed she must have went to the bathroom, so he lied down again. But the weird sound continued. It was coming from the floor above him. He said it sounded like a cat scratching its claws on the wooden floor, accompanied by what sounded like a person mumbling. He tried to ignore it, but it started getting louder, till he could hear multiple clawing noises from above, like multiple cats scratching on the wooden floor as well as mumbling. S still hasn't come back at this point, which made him worry. That's when he heard loud thumping from upstairs, like a person jumping. Grandpa's really weirded out at this point, so he covers his ears with his pillow. The next day, he told S that their cats were really loud and he couldn't sleep. S just looked at him confused and said, "We don't have cats." "Huh, that's weird. I could have sworn I heard cats last night," he said. On the 2nd night, he was woken up again by the same sounds. He says at that point he was thinking, what the fuck? Then he hears loud grunting from above, like an animal in pain. He tries going back to sleep, but he's startled by what sounded like a roar. This continues for another day until on the 4th night, Grandpa decided that he had had enough. He was going to man up, march upstairs, and see what the hell was going on. So it was around 1 a.m, according to him, and he said it was strange because he didn't hear any more of the weird noises. But he decided to go upstairs anyways. He tiptoed across the floor and reached the stairs leading to the 3rd floor. Once he reached the 3rd floor, he notices something weird. The lights wouldn't work, even though they were working fine before he went to bed. The only light source was the moonlight, which illuminated the interior well enough. He makes his way to the room that was above him on the 2nd floor where the sounds were coming from, and what he saw made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. The floor was littered with claw marks. The windows were wide open, and there were blood stains across the floor. There were no signs of S or her parents anywhere. Freaked out, he went back down to the 2nd floor, but then his nose caught a whiff of something that he hadn't noticed before, and it was coming from the kitchen. Curious, he went to take a look, but it was so dark that he could barely make anything out. As he walked, his hand touched something that felt like a large metal pot. He opened the lid. A great number of flies escaped, and his nose was assaulted with an extremely awful putrid smell. that he said nearly made him vomit. It was so dark that he couldn't see what was on the inside of the pot, so he immediately slammed down the lid and ran back to the room and forced himself to sleep. The next day during lunch, S's mother served dinuguan, animal blood that's been cooked and mixed with herbs and spices. But my grandpa excused himself and lied that he was sick. He didn't want to know what was in that food. S's mother tried to coax him to eat, saying that he'll regain his energy. This is when Grandpa takes the opportunity to find out the truth. You see, in the folklore, to identify whether or not a person is an Aswang is quite simple. Observe their eyes. If your reflection is upside down, then they're one of those. And Grandpa stared at S's mom's eyes and reeled back in horror. His reflection was upside down. This is when the mom's expression completely changes. She went from concerned to angry and was glaring hard at Grandpa. An expression that basically says, according to him, "You shouldn't have done that." That night, Grandpa doesn't waste time and immediately packs up and heads home, lying that there had been a family emergency in order for him to go. He finally returns home and spent a lot of time inside his house in complete fear. The following month, he breaks up with S. She looked at him in sadness and says that she understands that it was a wise choice for him, but it was quite a shame. Grandpa ended the story. He says that it was a huge shame indeed because he really wanted to marry her. Castle Fanman, Wales. So I visited Fanman Castle with my family. We had a really great time and I would recommend, but there were some weird things going on there that I'd like to share as a medium in training. But if you're sensitive to this sort of thing like me, be very careful and don't go alone throughout the entire night, because I was feeling dizzy and something that wasn't really happening outside of the building, only inside. The first room we entered was the library, and we were given free rein to do what we wanted up there. Upon entering, myself and my mother, we both felt a sharp pain in the chest, a rapid heartbeat, and difficulty breathing. No one else experienced this. We, myself, my mother, and my aunt, ended up using a pendulum to communicate. We ended up communicating with both spirits in the castle and from outside the castle. However, I'm just going to talk about the castle's spirits, the first one that I met. I had met her at home, and she was just a little girl. She seemed no older than 6, but this was incorrect. Wearing a light dress, who had long hair. This was later confirmed by one of the workers, that she was a little girl, and she was wearing light clothes when spotted. I also talked to somebody who passed of an unknown cause, but they shared an allergic reaction to theirs, that they had a visitor in the castle when eating. Towards our ending time of our visit, in the room I saw a lady of the manor, Lady Anne, walk across the other end of the room and stand in the corner staring at us. All of these experiences were explained part from the spirit who shared the allergy. I'll not be sharing what was said for any of these, by the way. The second rooms we visited was the men's sort of room, I guess, in the attic. I had been so scared in that room. Nothing wanted to communicate with us, but something was following us the whole time. We had absolutely no activity in the men's office room thingy until we went into the attic. It was a very small space, but I felt like we were being watched from all angles. I was so uncomfortable up there that I started crying. Things were thrown in the office area, doors were slammed, and something was in the back room of the attic. I saw even more shadow figures. The first one I saw was in a crawl space up in the attic that seemed to be a small child. Although other people saw a cat or some sort of animal, The second one I saw was in the back room, and it was a man peering round the corner staring at us. Whatever was in there wouldn't communicate with us at all, but was welcoming with the men apart from the guide. I would have photos of orbs from family members, but they were deleted in the attic by something unknown. I do, however, have a video of the room, which I'm very happy to share, but sadly cannot due to not having the people in the video's permission. The last rooms we visited was the cellar and the kitchen. Now, our guide asked us not to share certain things about the cellar and its history, but there is a male spirit who really likes blonde women. I didn't go into the basement due to that feeling once again being unwelcomed, but I saw my final shadow figure of the night, which was a man walking across the entrance of the cellar. The kitchen is where we ended off, by taking 2 children, a little boy and a little girl. The kitchen was the most calm room in the house, and it was also the one that I found to be the happiest. However, we didn't do a seance down there due to the guide having done 2 more previously. Ask Reddit. As a child, I was raised on a small farm. There were 2 barns. The smaller house had our chickens, and the larger housed our horses, goats, and whatever we had at the time, and a tool shed. Both these barns had old lighting fixtures, but they never really worked from the time that we moved into the place. But this is going to be quite relevant. One late night, I awoke from my slumber to the sound of loud, joyous music. As a small, adventurous child that I was, I climbed down my bed, slipped on my shoes, and went out the front door. I trudged my way down the acre leading to the large barn, which was howling with this melody. After a short while, I reached the latched gate. Hand after hand, I scaled the bar and hopped down to the ground. I stepped into the mouth of the barn and saw every last light blazing with light, no animal in sight. On the lip of the tool shed sat an old boombox. At that time, I heard my mother's voice carry across the wind as she bellowed my name, Cezaj. My head whipped around to look at the farmhouse, but when I turned to look back at the barn, the lights were lifeless. The animals still nowhere to be seen. The boombox? Well, it glared at me from the lip of that tool shed. The following morning, I returned to the barn, slipped on my muddy shoes of the night past, and there sat the old rickety boombox, plugged into an outlet which had no power running to it for years. Ask Reddit. Ed Ray, one night a few years back, my friend, who's driving, we were talking to his girlfriend and taking her home. When he decided to take the quote-unquote long way home, as we're driving along this fairly deserted back road, I began to zone out and stare at this blinking red light off in the distance, and casually thinking to myself, I wonder when they build a cell phone tower all the way out here, when suddenly it blinks and is dramatically closer than it was just a moment earlier. At this point, my friend points it out and stops in the road. It blinks once more and is directly in front and over top of us. The red light is so bright it floods the car in a deep scarlet hue. I lean forward so that way I can see directly into the light. In that brief moment, I feel a flood of negative emotions, and the closest description I can offer is to that of being naked underneath a giant microscope and having every pore examined thoroughly. I then look away from the light to my friend and ask him to drive. He barely responds, apparently in a similar state. Then he snaps out of it and starts driving. As we get a little way down the road, I notice the red light isn't fading and the interior of the car is still clearly lit by it. I look out of the window and to my horror, the light is following us and does so for approximately 1 or 2 miles. The light unexpectedly veers off to the left and comes down to ground level in a patch of trees. And this was adjacent to the road. My friend stops the car again and continues to stare at it and abruptly declares that he's going to get out and look. And it's like he's in some sort of trance. He opens the door and I grab his arm and tell him that if he does, I'm getting in the driver's seat and I'm leaving him. So that way we leave in that instant. He looks at me and seems to come to, punches the gas so hard that the tires lose traction and spin out. The light remained stationary as we rode away, but I've never looked at the night sky the same ever since. The incident occurred after dropping off my buddy's girlfriend, so she wasn't present. Ask Reddit. When I was, I want to say 9 or 10-ish, me and my family were in my kitchen playing Monopoly, having a blast. Now for a quick reference, the house we lived in at the time was pretty small. The kitchen was the biggest room by far, so that's where we spent a lot of time in. I'd say it was around 9 or 10 p.m., and while we're playing, my dog poked his head straight up and looked down the hallway. And at the end of the left in my room, across from my room, was my parents' room. Both lights were on, so that's on us. But my dog starts barking and getting really aggravated. We look down the hall and see a human silhouette walk from my parents' room into my room. We were in shock and didn't know what to do. My dad got up, grabbed a knife, and slowly walked down the hall. My dog followed behind him. My mom got her phone and started to dial 911, but my dad stopped her because how could somebody walk from their room into mine without us seeing the person? He looked in my room first. No one was there. He went into his room, also empty, so we walked back to the kitchen and sat down where we just sat there in silence, not knowing what to do. My dog went back into a relaxed state while we were all on edge. Still, I was practically shitting myself. I didn't want to sleep in my room after that, so I pleaded with my parents to please let me stay in their room. A couple of hours went by and we decided to go to bed. I couldn't sleep, so I laid with my parents just staring at the ceiling while shaking in fear, thinking some kind of boogeyman's gonna get me. I wish I fell asleep because what I saw that night was just horrifying. I don't know if it was my mind making something up, or if there was actually something standing there in the dark. I was frozen in fear as I stared at that shadow being. My eyes being adjusted to the dark, I could see a bit more clearly. I could see a bit of their facial features, but not enough to make a face. I couldn't see eyes at all, but I swear that it stared, and that thing was looking, because I saw a smile slowly go across their face, and I dove under the blanket shaking. I woke my dad up, and he turned the lights on, and there was nothing near the doorway. He waited for me to fall asleep, and when I woke up, I was in my room, and shortly after this incident, he moved out. My dad put me in my room, just to clarify. Ask Reddit. In my early 20s, I had a friend that lived in the basement of his mom's house. This was a fully finished and furnished basement as well, and it wasn't like a creepy murder basement. Anyway, his mom had a great deal on the house because the previous owner, a man named Harry, had cancer and committed suicide in the garage, which was directly over top of the basement, including the bathroom, family room, and a spare bedroom. There were stairs from the garage that came directly into that family room area that we used, so maybe this was just so to not bother his mom. His room was directly adjacent to the family room area and had a doorway but no door separating the two rooms. Okay, now that the description's out of the way, We had several 5 or more experiences in this basement that I classify as paranormal to the extreme. The first time I experienced it, we were in the basement playing PS3, and the light in the family room turned on. It was just the 2 of us there, then it turned itself off again. My buddy looked in the room and was like, "That's just Harry, don't worry about it." The light continued to come on and off randomly throughout the night. Another night, there was a whole group of us watching football with the lights off. We all looked at the same corner of the room at the exact same time. It was the corner of the room that would be closest to the garage. And coming from the ceiling were these long black tendrils of smoke. One of the guys jumped up and turned the light on when we watched those tendrils suck back into the corner and disappear. There was another time we were sitting around and heard the door from the garage to the stairwell slam, stomping down the stairs, and then the light in the family room came on and went off several times. Then stomping back up the stairs and another slam. The creepiest thing about this is the only light switch by the stairs was in full view of my buddy's room. There was definitely no one flipping it. Also, we went to check to see if it was a person. There is no way somebody could have gotten out of the garage faster than we scaled up those stairs. And my big encounter, which was also the last time I stayed the night. I was sleeping in the spare room and woke up to the worst feeling in my stomach that someone was staring at me. Then I got the feeling that whatever was watching me wanted me out. I started to sit up, and when I did, something slapped the shit out of me. I freaked and turned the lamp on next to the bed, and there was no one there. But the family room outside the spare room seemed to literally suck the light from the lamp up. I grabbed my phone, turned on its flashlight, turned on the spare bedroom light, made my way to the light switch in the family room and turned it on too. Then I went and sat on a couch in my friend's room and watched that family room the rest of the night. The light went off and on at least 4 times. Middle of the desert, skinwalker experience. My sister and I were off-roading around 1 a.m. this one night in my old Jeep. We ended up coming across this large water retention basin and decided to explore it a bit. While we were cruising around, we started talking about skinwalkers and whether or not they're real. The conversation had spooked both of us a bit as it was pitch black out. Not a light in sight other than my light bars. We ended up changing the topic and kept on cruising. Not even 20 minutes later, we both got this very uneasy feeling of being watched. Shortly after, my dash lights start flickering. Something that they never do and haven't done since. Already spooked from the previous conversation, this creeped us out even more and we decided it was time to call it a night. As we were about to leave the retention basin, my Jeep engine died, trying to climb the slight hill out, which was also not normal for my Jeep. It struggled to start but eventually started and it was barely running. At this point, we were terrified and I gunned it out of there while my Jeep continued to run like it had a bullet shot through the engine. We definitely said our prayers as neither one of us was going to get out and take a look at that point. Once we got back to the main road, we made it to the gas station close by and stopped to investigate. Upon investigation, I found a vacuum line had been disconnected. A vacuum line that should not have come off as it's securely connected. I reattached the line and my Jeep ran perfectly and hasn't come off for years. I have without a doubt real paranormal experiences in the past, and this definitely felt the same. Was it just an unfortunate series of events, or was there something out there with us that night? I'll never know, and I definitely don't want to go back out and find out for myself. Ask Reddit. This happened a few years ago, but I remember it very clearly. I was up late one night reading some stuff on my phone. Deciding it would be a good time to stop and get some sleep, I closed the screen and turned to the other side of the bed since I feel like the coolness of the sheets. I see a man standing in the front of my door, only it was a silhouette of a man, just a black figure standing there like it was waiting for something. Now I know it wasn't a person because they would need to open the door, and even if I'm dead asleep, as soon as my door opens, I'm wide awake. Luckily, it had its back turned to me, I suppose. I continued to stare at it for a good couple minutes, making sure that it wasn't my eyes playing a trick on me, and they weren't. To further prove to myself I wasn't dreaming or anything of the sort, I called out my sister's name. I knew it couldn't be her standing there, but it couldn't hurt to see. After I did, that shadowy figure simply faded away, like it got chased off. I lay on my back thinking about what happened, maybe not being real, if I was in a dreamlike state where I'm still conscious of my surroundings. But a minute later, my mom opens the door and calls me out to see if I'm still awake. But I pretended to be asleep, and that meant that she heard me call out my sister's name. That meant everything that happened was real. I didn't sleep until it was clearly morning that day. Ask Reddit. I was in my basement, sitting on the corner of my couch, and out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw my young sister walk by into the kitchen. She was wearing a long white gown or a t-shirt. I was so convinced that I saw her that I got up and started calling her name, looking for her, but no luck. My friends were down there, sort of just gave me crazy looks. I wrote it all off as my eyes playing tricks on me, and since I didn't have any other experience after that for a while, I dismissed it. 4 years later or so, I was with several groups of friends I was with a separate group of friends from the previous time, all of whom I'd never told the story to. My friend was sitting in the exact same spot that I had been at when he suddenly asks me, "Hey, is your sister home?" She wasn't home, so of course I asked him why he asked, and he responded, "Well, I thought I just saw her walk into the kitchen back there." The hairs on my arm stood up, so I asked him what it looked like. She was wearing a long white t-shirt. I've never gotten the chills like that before. I had a couple other experiences in my basement, such as burning feelings on my arm, which turned into a raised scratch. There was also a time I was on the couch with my girlfriend, who never believed me when out of nowhere a towel that was hanging up just swung up, swayed back and forth. All in all, I've had enough weird moments in that basement that I assume that there has to be something a little bit unexplainable down there. The moment that cemented my belief was when I told the story to a neighbor. They were fascinated and went on to explain that a family who used to live on my street a few houses down had 2 sons who claimed that a girl in a white dress sat in the corner of their room and talked to them at night. The parents were so freaked out that they decided to move away. Seriously sounds like some made-up bullshit, but I know what I've experienced, and no one's going to change my mind. My grandpa's haunted house. So I'd like to get rid of a few things about the old house of my grandfather. Prehistory. The house was built around 200 years ago. As far as I know, there were often soldiers in World War II, and a few were given shelter here. One disappeared after a few days without a trace. It was also an old restaurant. About 40 years later, my grandpa found an old cross in the garage and decided to restore it. After a few weeks, strange things happened. Mary and Jesus pictures started to sway without wind or any human influence. The whole house was shaking without wind that day. Or similar, and in Bavaria, there's also no earthquakes. So loud noises in the basement. My grandfather then mounted a cross on a nearby tree. Since then, it's always foggy around the tree. My grandmother had cancer and died of it. She had a phone in her room, which was only connected to the phone in the living room she needed help. She couldn't call anyone else with it. A few days later, when she died, the phone rang in the living room with the number of my grandmother's phone. When you answered the phone, you heard only breathing, then it hung up. First, there was no longer a connection to the phone downstairs, and second, the contract of the phone was terminated. My grandpa then died on December 2015. Now, 2023, I myself have already experienced many things. Story number 1. Me and my buddy went 23 o'clock at night to the house to go get something. When we got to the kitchen, to get into the kitchen, you have to go from the hallway, left through the door, and then close the door behind us. Suddenly someone knocked. We panicked but still decided to open the door, but there was no one there. Suddenly there was a loud bang. We ran quickly back down to the kitchen. After a few minutes we heard footsteps in front of the door. We then looked outside, but again there was no one to see. We then heard someone from the hallway run towards us. There was no one to see either. We ran directly home. Story number 2. I and a colleague have met in the evening and we were chilling in the living room. The living room is directly connected to the kitchen. After a few minutes, we heard right above us a loud bang and loud footsteps. My friend panicked, waited outside, and I went upstairs alone and had a look out there, but there was no one to find. Story 3. Once a friend and me decided to set up 2 cameras in the hallway. At the end of the hallway, there goes a door straight into the stall, and on the right, a stair to the bedrooms in the attic. My buddy pointed his camera toward the stairs and to the beginning of the hallway, and I pointed the camera from the beginning of the hallway towards the end. When we went to get both phones were on the floor with the camera pointing toward the ceiling. Both video cut off at the exact same time and both fell to the floor at the exact same time. Story number 4. Me and a friend went to the house at night. We wanted to film on the second floor. At the top of the stairs, there were 3 doors, one at the front, one at the left, and one on the right. We went to the right door. In the door, there was a chair to block. So we got to the hallway where at the end, the right and left are open doors. Then we went in, having discovered something suspicious. When we looked at the recordings afterwards, you saw on the left door a hand and a face. It was clear to see, but we checked the rooms and there was no one in there. Sadly, I don't have the recordings anymore. Story number 5. When my cousin and I were kids, we slept at my grandpa's house. We then went to the toilet at night when we suddenly heard very loud scratching on the front door. We then thought that we were pranking each other, but then it happened again at the time where my mother had lived about 2 months after separating with my father in the house. Because it's her parents' house, she said after a few weeks she felt very uncomfortable, not welcome, and always watched. She had many sleep paralysis and also heard footsteps, loud noises, and then quickly moved out again. Things happened again and again. Lights go on, go off, doors open on their own, things lie on the floor, footsteps, voices, things are moving. Most of the time, the people are feeling very uncomfortable. At each visit, strange things happen. We'll spend the day at the house alone and we'll take my camera and try to film something. I'll post it here if some of you are interested. Hope y'all can help me or us figure out what's going on, and please let me know if someone's experienced something similar. Ask Reddit. I had always believed in them, but it was not until moving to Hawaii did I really cement it in my mind. Before that, it was always a feeling. For example, to this day, I cannot stand being in Andersonville, Georgia. I have a good amount of family buried there, so we visit quite often. But it's so unbearably uncomfortable. No matter where you walk, you're walking over bodies of people who suffered horribly in a POW camp. When we moved to Hawaii, though, that was another level. Ford Island was terrifying. Black figures moving around, dogs going crazy for no reason, people going crazy for no reason. The screams, I only heard a scream once, but I'll never forget it. There are no foxes or coyotes to explain the noises. I wasn't the only one to hear or see these things. I was with a group of 4 people when we saw the silhouette in the dark, and when we heard the scream from an abandoned and boarded up building. Finally, one night, I was in bed sleeping, but I had woken up randomly. I felt this heavy pressure in my chest. I got up in a panic, and just for a split second, I saw the face of my neighbor. I ran to my parents' room and woke him up, telling him something was in the room. No one was there, of course. The next morning, I didn't see my neighbor outside, and he always said hello to me. He was kind of a nice old man who lived with his daughter's family. It wasn't until I got home from school that I learned that he had passed away in his sleep overnight. I don't know what any of it means, but I refused to sleep in my room for a long time after that. Another experience similar, being woken up by someone choking me, but they weren't there after, and that was basically causing me such a fright that I didn't sleep in an actual bed until I went to college. That was about 6 years of refusing to sleep in a bed and sleeping on the floor just because it had been so ingrained in my head that I'd continue seeing ghosts or spirits, or hear lizards. Obviously, I sleep in a bed now, but it still startles me if someone stays the night and I wake up and see another person. Maybe those incidents were my young brain coping with things, or maybe I'm just nuts. It's going to take a lot to convince me that those spirits on Ford Island and the mountains are just my overactive imagination. I think I just got visited by my grandparent, that I got named after. Hey, so a few days ago, one of my grandparents died, and I know this probably sounds completely strange, but I think I just got visited by him. I was watching some YouTube videos with a few friends together, and I had a really strange feeling that someone would walk with his fingers along my neck. I mean, I got named after my grandpa, but I can't remember the last time I visited him. He lives in a different country. A few days ago, when my mother planned to visit him, since he was very sick and we knew that he didn't have much time left, in the next few days, she got a call from her brother that he died in the morning. I was really sad, but it hit my mother way harder than me. She wanted to visit her family and drive alone to them. The next few days, nothing much happened. My mother sent a few pictures from the funeral, and a few days later, which is today, I watched YouTube videos with 2 friends of mine on Discord. I was kind of shocked when exactly that happened, but what I wrote at the beginning of this, I later felt like his hands on my shoulder, and I still do. Right now at the moment, while I'm writing this. I had before sometimes had that feeling of a hand resting on my shoulder, but I really sort of felt like it was walking along with its fingers up my neck. I never had this feeling before. So, am I haunted? So I know this sounds strange. I think I can feel the presence of ghosts. Let me explain before you think I'm just completely lost my mind. Lately, a few family members died, 3 in the last 2 years. I felt the presence of them, and there happens to be strange stuff around my apartment. I will simply mention the stuff that happened so far. I feel the touch of them. After some time, when they died, I felt and still sometimes feel their touch around my back, like someone's walking with a hand movement up and down, a hand resting on my back or playing with my hair. And when my dog died, I felt his presence also. I still do sometimes, like he's laying next to my legs. He always used to sleep in the same bed with me. There is a specific light that starts to flicker when I'm near it. Can't explain why, but the light in my hallway always starts to flicker when I'm nearby. I saw a doppelganger inside my mirror when I was in the bathroom one day. I saw myself standing in the mirror, almost had a heart attack when I noticed that this version of me had different clothes on. I was running away from it and simply thought, how on earth should this be possible? So I was walking to the mirror again, and he was still there. Since that happened, I'm really afraid of mirrors. When I was just 20 minutes ago in the kitchen, there was the fall of a bag from an open cabinet, and the door just moved on its own. Introducing Bengt, my weirdest friend. Picture a decently tall humanoid shake with no features, hair or clothes, and with skin as white as paper, with areas covered in dust and dirt all over. For the sake of convenience and to add a little bit of lightheartedness to it all, let's call this thing Bengt. The first time I ever saw Bengt, I was around 10 years old and had just gotten home from jiu-jitsu. We have 2 showers in our house, one on both sides, the first and the second floor respectively. I was using the one on the second floor. The shower doesn't have a... Sorry, the writing is confusing here. The shower doesn't have a curatorn, but instead has a super cloudy skid-intricate glass door. So we always lock the door to the room itself when using it. I was just about to get done in the shower, and as I was turning it off, from the corner of my eye to all the way across the room, and finally disappearing by walking to the opposite corner of my field of view, I say it. Bengt was just walking past, not making a sound and not even acknowledging me. Second time I was 15, as I am now, and I was sitting in the kitchen eating breakfast with my dad and my little brother. My mom had left for work an hour prior, and my little sister was still asleep. And I say it again, with outstretched arms darting behind me from underneath the table at insane speeds. Once again, not making a sound, my dad and my brother didn't seem to notice it at all, so I didn't mention it. The third time, I was walking between the school bus and the school in the morning. For a split second, as I was walking by one of the buildings, I saw Bengt just standing there, facing me, and not moving a centimeter, maybe except for a little bit of swaying. Another thing, throughout each of the 3 encounters, I was never immediately afraid, just weirded out and a bit curious in that moment. It's only after, when reflecting on it, that it sort of starts to scare me a bit. What experience or occurrence made you believe that the deceased was there with you at a funeral? I wanted to share an incredible experience I had during a recent funeral service that truly left me in awe. It was a deeply emotional day as we said our final goodbyes to my father. However, amidst the grief and sadness, there was a profound occurrence that made me strongly believe that the deceased was there with us, watching over and offering comfort. As we gathered around the grave, ready to pay our respects, a magnificent monarch butterfly appeared and gracefully fluttered around the area. It was an enchanting sight, as if time stood still for that moment. And what struck me the most was that the butterfly stayed by the grave for the entire duration of the funeral service. The delicate creature seemed to be at ease, even amidst the tears and sorrow. It danced in the air, floating gently from flower to flower as if sharing a serene connection with the departed soul. Its vibrant colors and elegant movements brought a sense of tranquility to the atmosphere, enveloping us in a warm embrace. The sight of this butterfly lingered in my mind long after the service ended. It felt like a sign, a symbol of hope, transformation, and eternal life. In many cultures and belief systems, butterflies are associated with the presence of departed loved ones, as they're often seen as messengers from the spiritual realm. I couldn't help but wonder if the monarch butterfly was sent by our departed loved ones to reassure us that they were at peace and still with us in spirit. It felt like a poignant reminder that even in the depths of grief, there is beauty and solace to be found. The presence of the butterfly brought comfort to everyone present, and it sparked conversations among attendees who were equally moved by this extraordinary encounter. It was a powerful reminder that our connection with those we love transcends the physical realm, and that they continue to touch our lives, even after they've departed.